Hey, welcome back to Go Ask Sawyer. This is Jamie, your host of Go Ask Sawyer. If you could all just take one moment before we dive into our episode today and just go to the bottom of that review, hit the 5 stars, leave a comment. Today, I have on my lovely, talented, very intense, strong friend, Megahn. And we're going to be talking about blended families. I know I have a lot of friends now, I feel like, that have blended families. It's the cool new thing to have. I don't have a blended family. But Megahn, I feel like, is an expert in blended families. So I wanted her to come on and share her experience with that. So hello, Megahn.
Hello.
Now, whenever I have people come on, I give them a list of things to answer questions. So did you choose one or two things that you want to tell us a little bit about?
Like
So we
5.
know.
I chose 5.
What? You can only do one or two. Only one or two.
Fine. In the spirit of our friendship, and that's why I'm on the show, you had asked that I could say one thing I do like about myself or that I even love about myself. And I would say a character trait that I do love is how I show up for my friends as a friend. If that
I
makes
agree.
sense.
I agree.
That's good. Glad you feel that way. I think I like it though because it's interesting because I've also learned so much from it in my life. It can also be my Achilles heel, if that makes sense, as a almost from a love language perspective. Because when people first start to figure out their love languages, for those of you that know what that is, look it up if you don't. We tend to always want to receive love in the same way that we give it, whether that's in friendships or relationships or whatever that is. And so for a long time, I just kind of expected that same thing out of my friends, which means that you're very present and you're kind of at everything and you just show up. You physically show up. You're showing up at everything and you're very kind of in your face kind of friend.
Yeah.
If that's an
and you
accurate way
are
to
an in your
describe that.
face friend. You are for sure an in your face friend.
So it took me a long time to learn that that does not mean that people don't love me back because they're not doing that same thing. And so I've learned a lot from that because it can also be my weakness at times, but I continue to learn from that all the time. So that's one thing about me. It's important also to talk about how we met. I just think that's a good question for all your guests. I think it should be baked into everything.
It's a great question. Why
It's a
do we
great
meet?
question. Honestly, I think you would have to answer this because I don't really remember how we met. I just know how I know you, which Jamie and I went to the same circle of schools, private schools or parochial schools in the Milwaukee area. And so we went to rival grade schools. And I knew because her school held this really fancy basketball tournament when we were in middle school. And we would go there and everybody knew who Jamie was. So that's how I knew who Jamie was. And we ended up going. I don't know if we actually met then or not, though, or if I just
I
kind
don't
of like
think
stared.
so. I don't think so. I was just a cheerleader.
Yeah, she was just a cheerleader. Just that everybody knew. And then we ended up in the same high school. Went to high school. We were in the same high school. And so to be honest, I don't know if we were actually ever introduced or if we just started hanging out or what happened there. I don't really know, but we became friends.
Yeah, I think in high school we just started hanging out mutually with the boys. But I do have to say my remembrance of you is you played soccer in high school. And I think a part of that intimidated me. Like I was like, oh, the soccer girls. Maybe that's why I'm gay. But anyways, that was just all of a sudden I was like, ooh, soccer girls. I got like super sidetracked. Anyways, I remember you playing soccer and I was just like, wow, that is so cool. And I was a little bit intimidated by it too. So that's something to ponder and think about. But I think we just really hung out with the mutual, John and Brad and all those boys. And before you knew it, like we decided to room together at Whitewater. And then you continued on and I was kindly asked to leave Whitewater, which could be another
I
story.
followed you for a while too there.
Yes, you did. You did.
It'd be a good idea to go to Milwaukee for a while.
So Megahn and I have known each other since grade school, unknowingly. A
long time.
A long time. And so in that we've been through with each other through a lot of things. College, getting married, divorce, all like coming out, having kids, all the things. And Megahn got remarried at 29, what
30.
year?
I was
20,
30.
how
2010.
old? 2010.
I
I
was
don't know why
30.
I said 2019. You've definitely been married longer than that. So you got remarried and to a lovely man, James, who had 2 kids. Now, I really want to kind of focus on the blended family thing tonight. And so let's just start with, what does blended family mean to you?
Blended family means to me a group of people or individual that have been brought together with others that weren't always there in existence in their life, whether
Mhm.
that be biologically or not. So
Okay.
you're with new people that you weren't always with or didn't always know. So that can look like a lot of things.
So you and James got married and he had 2 kids.
Hmm.
And how old were they at the time?
Tyler was 6 and Emma was 3.
Okay. I mean, that's little. That is
It was little.
little. That's That's still brand new. They're still trying to figure out the world. So you
Yes.
didn't come in there like they're teenagers and they're like, "Oh, hey, lady, what's going on?" My kids
Yeah.
are kind of like that at this point. They're like, "Oh, mom, who's this?" But
Right.
like when they're little like that, it's different. So maybe start with what was easy in the beginning, what was hard in the beginning. Did you and James even talk about like how do we do this?
Yeah, I would say I'll fly in real hot here with a tip and trick. If anyone is going through this or will be experiencing it or has friends, I can't express enough how important it is to understand the person who has children already, and maybe it's both people, but they may want different
Yeah.
things, right? Out of a new person, and that doesn't necessarily have to be your spouse, but if you just decide to be partners or whatever, or even as you're navigating the waters of dating or whatever that is, what do they want now and what do they eventually want out of someone who will potentially be a partner for them,
Hmm.
with their kids? What's that role to be? James made it extremely clear to me that he, and likely, and actually I do know because his kids were small, he did want another parent. He wanted someone to play a parent role, which, as you were saying before too, that can look really different if you already have teenagers. You don't really need
Hmm.
somebody to raise them anymore. I mean, it's possible, but
Yeah.
more than
I mean,
likely,
raise
that's not the
them.
scenario.
Yeah, and raise them maybe in a different way, but they're
Right,
older,
right.
right?
Right. Being present as a respectable figure in their life or whatever may be something that's requested, but James knew exactly what he wanted. He was very clear about it. So that needed to be something that I decided would fit in my life, and that was being another parent to them.
Mhm.
So that was made very, very clear. And if that's not clear or you don't know what it is, I highly suggest figuring that out. It's kind of important. Like having that "are we having children" conversation before you actually get married kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's an
yeah.
important thing to figure it out sooner than later. And sometimes that can just kind of be taken for granted. But back to your question of, what was easy and what was hard in the beginning when Emma and Tyler were that age, really what was easy was the relationship with the kids, and that also made it very easy for me to kind of decide where we were going to go with our relationship. The relationship I had with Emma and Tyler was amazing. We were very close and it was very easy and we had a lot of fun together and did a lot of awesome things together, so that was great. As far as what was hard, i think I think James and I were both still really immature in trying to, as a lot of people are, you're still learning. You're learning together for so many, many years,
Mhm.
what good choices are. And I feel like, and everybody can say that there were a lot of mistakes to be had, but I think just kind of accepting that you don't know what the hell is going on.
Yeah, and
And
from what I know of you, you like control, and you like to
yeah,
know the things, and so the
yes.
unknown,
And
I think, scares you.
I did very much at the time, way more than now, at the time. And I mean, I was just beginning my journey of letting go of control when I met James. That was a hard part of my healing process from my divorce. And knowing that there is, not everything's written out for you on a canvas or all painted out for your whole life like I thought it
Yeah,
was. So I think that just checking in with yourself a lot through that process was not something we did because we didn't know how, or nobody was really
yeah.
telling us to do that. And learning how to manage, for us, I think the hard thing was he went through a very messy divorce and the decisions about the children were very messy and it went on for years and years. And so not everybody's situation is like that. But for us, that's what was really hard, was being able to separate the divorce from daily life. It just
Yeah,
seemed to creep in from all angles, no matter what happened. And that in any relationship, you have to value the relationship a lot to show up for your kids better
yeah.
and value yourself a lot. And while we knew that, we weren't prioritizing that. We just didn't know how to do it very well. So it affected us a lot. So that was really hard.
And I think too, people forget that when you blend a family, there is still the exes. Now, some people don't have the ex in the picture, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of most blended families I know have the other person still in the picture somewhere. So then there's also that sticky weirdness of my ex and I make the decisions and you're here for support, or you and I make the decisions, and then what kind of voice do you get to have, and how that it's I think that's sometimes a whole nother side of blending families that people just don't talk about. That's really
Right.
hard, like dealing with the ex.
Right. Right. And for some people it can go over really well. I mean, I think taking in all the knowledge as possible that you can learn from those situations is the best thing you can possibly do.
Yeah. So what was okay, so the easy part was it seemed that you and the kids, everyone just got along. The hard part, what was the hard part again? Not knowing?
The
I
hard
forgot.
part was managing and separating his divorce
Oh, right.
and the ongoing decisions to be made with the kids that were tied to the divorce.
Yeah. Yeah.
Separating that from our daily life. It
Mhm.
crept in like every day. It was just so
Mhm.
heavy, and it was just very heavy for the first several years of our being together in a new blended
Mhm.
unit. So it
Well,
was
then
hard to
starting
do
a
that.
new family, a new relationship, right, too, like, we can't just be us. We're also dealing
Right.
with all of this.
Always. And it was always there, right? It wasn't just a little bit at a time. So that's what was hard for us. Was I don't think we knew what the hell we were doing.
Well, I mean, I do think that's all couples, but I feel like sometimes with blended families, it can weigh even heavier.
Very
Okay,
heavy.
so then you and James now, the Megan I know never wanted to have kids. Never. Like Megan was like, nope, I don't want to have kids. Maybe adoption someday, but having kids was like a hard off the table. And then you meet James and you have hearts in your eyes and you're like, well, maybe. And I do feel like I remember you saying at one point, maybe I would have kids with him. And I was like, wait, what? Wait, what?
Yep.
Because it was just something you had, it felt like in your soul, you were very like, nope, I don't need to do this. So, talk a little bit about that. You guys decided to bring kids into the family. How did that
Yeah.
add yet another layer of either easy or hard to what you two are doing?
So many layers.
So many layers.
So many layers of complication. So, yes, you are you are right. I think as a real little kid, or growing up, I always thought I'd have a family, and then that very quickly went away for most of my 20s, I think. And then yes, it came back, and I do think that has a lot to do with my relationship with Emma and Tyler, and just completely falling in love with our family unit. And I think James felt the same way, and we wanted to take our new family nucleus, a part of it, and make it stronger,
Mm-hmm.
making the unit stronger by adding on to it and moving forward with what our new family looked like. So we ended up having two children, and
We
the
decided to
first
have
one,
two.
yep, the first one, we'll say that. The first one was easy as far as the blend.
Mhm.
It was actually amazing. I can even remember the day that we told Emma and Tyler, um, and what we were doing and how excited they were. It was amazing. It was a great experience. And at that time, Tyler was 10 and Emma was 8. So they were really good ages for that. And I think they loved experiencing every moment of number 3 coming about,
Yeah.
and growing up and being one. And then we told them we were having another one, and that was not received the same way.
No, what happened with the second
No.
one?
I mean, honestly, at that point, you're now talking middle school, and they know what it takes to have a baby in the house. It can
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
pain in the ass. And,
Yeah, it
like,
really can.
it took, a year. I really, and I know they just relished and loved every moment of having a baby and having
Yeah.
a sibling that was growing up with them, but it was like they only had to do it once.
Mhm.
And by the time they got middle school, they had their rhythm and rhyme to everything and how it was going. And Hazel, number 3, was old enough where we could just pick her up and take her everywhere with us and whatever it was. So it was a very large disruption to have number 4. And yeah, I will definitely say they were not very happy about that news. So that was much harder.
So, okay, now you have 4 children and it's been a few years. How has any of this changed? What has become easier? What has become harder? Is it still, I mean, I feel like when dealing with co-parents, like that never really goes away. What has become either easier or harder?
So today, so everybody knows, the big kids are grown and out of the house. So that's one thing. But along the journey, I think it just, honestly, as strange as it is, it takes time, but it takes involvement, intentional involvement, as
Hmm.
really any good relationship has.
Yeah.
And times were always harder for the six of us when my husband and I did not invest intentional time with the big kids. Not that little kids can be ignored,
They
but
cannot. Even if you try to ignore them, they will latch on.
they will latch on. But I think the thing to know is that you are taking care of them. They are feeling loved by you providing for their basic needs every
Yeah.
day and all
Yeah.
day long, and they get
Yeah.
so much attention that you really, with a gap like that of an entire decade in between kids, and even longer between Tyler and our youngest Alice,
Yeah.
13 total years there. You really had to work very hard, and so it became harder to intentionally pay attention. And if individual dates with the older kids would get canceled or whatever, staying on top of those and making sure that that would still happen, which there were many times when it didn't,
Yeah.
and it was very obvious when that became harder. But really investing and finding the time, paying extra money, whatever it was that you had to do to do that. And so that was what was made it hard. It was pretty obvious looking back when we didn't do that. And the other things that made it hard was just the big kids growing up, and
Yeah.
going through puberty and going through hormones and going through not wanting to talk to you. And I think the hardest thing was just the day to day grind when you are providing those needs for those little kids just constantly, whether it's feeding them at the table and being able to spend so little attention. It's really easy for the older kids to retreat into their bedrooms, which, yes, maybe they would have
Yeah.
done anyways, but kind of being able to pay more attention to what's going on when they're doing that became much harder.
I do wonder also, and I don't know if you've ever talked to the kids about this, but you get remarried, you and your husband have kids that just live at your house always because those are your kids. And
Yep.
then the kids from, your husband's family go back and forth. Do you think
Yep.
they ever felt like, I mean, and I used to think this about my kids too, just that feeling of like never truly having one solid home, or like, well, these kids get to live with mom and dad, or Meghan and dad all the time, and now we have to go here and here. Do you think there's like feelings of resentment or jealousy that also creep in, that if you're, like you said, if you're not intentional, can
Yep.
become bigger?
100%. And I know they did at certain times, and there's also and there's outside influences. You can't control everything. It's not,
Right.
if it was only our world, it would have looked different,
Yeah.
but there are outside influences. And I think a difficult thing for our situation is that the co-parenting was pretty much non-existent because there were such different parenting styles. Even trying to respect where each other was coming from, it oftentimes didn't happen,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So regardless of all of our efforts for communication, so sometimes I think people need to know in a blended situation, it is okay to let go of that, right? Because sometimes if you just keep trying and you do your best at it and it's not going anywhere, it's sometimes not worth your effort anymore. So I think that's something also to consider. So as far as the kids, always having feelings that creep up, yes, but there are always times of joy for them as
Yeah.
well, and that would be during those times of investment or what have you. But I think something that we learned that was really important as well was always having a routine.
Okay.
That I know made it feel like home. For example, and this is just one example for us, it was going to church every time they were here.
Yeah.
We would do the same thing on Sundays. It was very reliable, and we all know that routine for kids is important, but kids are kids all the way until they're not kids.
All the
So
way.
that matters for teenagers as well. It 100% matters for teenagers as well. So when coming home to a particular home A or home B or mom or dad's or whoever that might be, what are they going to get there? Do they know what to expect? If they know what to expect, and so there are kind of two things: having a little bit of a routine, And then also having some simple ground rules, like
Yeah.
being a parent and not a friend, and that's a dangerous and slippery slope when you're in a blended or divorce situation.
You find yourself trying to do things, and I think a lot of parents go through this, especially from in a
Yes.
divorce situation. Like,
Yes.
I either want to be your friend or I want to do extra things because I have maybe a
Right.
chip of guilt on my shoulder and I know this is hard on you, so I'm not going to be as hard on you.
Right.
But I think there is really something to be said about not only routine, every if I'm at Dad and Meg's house, we're going to go to church every Sunday, but I also know what to expect from you. And I think
Right.
sometimes parents forget that if there isn't that consistency, then there's that uncertainty, and with uncertainty comes
Right.
maybe anxiety or like I don't know what to expect or
A lot of
maybe
things can come from it.
yeah,
And not
and
knowing,
trust.
I mean, yes, and that's where kids have the love for their parents, whether they want to fight with you about it or not, because you're letting them stay out at whatever time, or they can't go to this or that party or whatever, it doesn't matter. They've cared enough about you, and that comes back around, to set ground rules for them. And it doesn't
Yeah.
mean like coming on to them with a hammer all the time about all these rules. It's just a few simple things that always will remain the same in your home, and that's
Mhm.
again just kind of setting those expectations and kind of keeping it light that way. We found over time would help too. We did have to
Yeah.
evolve our parenting style very much so,
Yeah.
and we learned that throughout the years. And so I think that's something too, is taking a check, like, is this working? You can do that as a parent too. If this isn't working anymore, it's the same thing as changing anything else in your life. You need to evolve and change it and try something different.
So speaking of routine and I know God is very alive in your house and religion. I'm sure that has also helped bridge any kind of relationship or again creates that love or that here's where I can go, here's where I can heal, here's what we can trust. I know you guys also do triathlons. And as a family, I feel like you guys all work out together. That's kind of been a focus of your family. And I did want to bring this, I did want you to also talk about this because I feel like in a family of six with what you have, it's also, I don't want to say it's been the glue that has held you together, but I almost wonder if that has been another consistency and another thing they've relied on with you and James. Well, what triathlon we're doing this year, or what are Megs and Dad training for this year, and knowing that that is really important to you. Talk a little bit about how triathlon has played into your family and how maybe that has become an important thing in your fammy.
Yeah, my husband and I actually have a run anniversary
Oh,
because that's
cute.
technically how we got together. So I think long before the kids even played a role in our lives, it was very important to both of us. So, and Jamie was at our first race together as well.
Mm-hmm.
um, so it is very important. I think more than just how things happen is it always goes back to the why, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
we do have a culture of fitness in our family, and I think understanding why you do things often explains the how just as much, or it's important, right? So if you think something's really important to implement in your life or in your family, I think it's really important to always be attached to that why you're doing it, because in those
Yeah,
tough times, that's what's going to carry you through.
I like
Even
that.
when you don't have a plan, even when you don't have the roadmap, even when you don't have everything set out, that desire and coming back to that purpose is kind of really important. So obviously for us, and for a lot of people, having fitness, it's important for health. We do care about it for that. But my husband and I also have an extreme love for it. It's a passion. Exercising and doing races and sharing our joy of it with other people has always been a passion. So that we knew that was always going to be really important to us. But then, obviously, going back to is the message I had before of caring about yourself, right? And caring
Mhm.
about the marriage or the relationship at hand when there are kids involved, and taking time for yourself. So all those were really important and it always came out and manifested themselves in fitness. Um, so I think back to the question of how and how that works in our family of six, I think it's taken all different shapes and sizes when there
Mhm.
were babies and 5-year olds and teenagers and 10-year olds, all different levels and different things, and it's kind of evolved. Triathlon has always been the main element in all of that, but it has
And just
broken off
real
for yeah.
and just real quick to pause for those of you that are like they keep saying triathlon and I I know I've heard of it. So triathlon is a swim, bike, run. Usually the ones I've done are short, maybe a quarter mile. It's been so long. The bike is usually maybe 14 to 17 miles, depending on what you're doing. And then the run is like a 5K, so 3.1 miles. I did a bunch of them in my 20s, and now I would never want to jump in the water again. But that's a triathlon: swim, you bike, and you run. And then
Yep.
that's what Megahn and James are doing.
Yeah. And there's four different distances. The ones Jamie's was explaining are pretty short ones, and there's the longest kind, which I'm sure most of you heard of, which is an Ironman.
And what is the distance for the the distance for the Ironman is what again?
120.6 miles.
Well, we got to break it up. What's the swim?
We got to break it up. Swim is a little over 2 miles. The bike is 112 miles, and the run is a full marathon.
Yeah. So I've done a marathon, and there's no way I could do anything else but that in a day. And James has done 2 now, which I just think is fascinating. And how it takes people like 12 to 16 hours to do this. Like, it's just, it's, anyways, it's
so
amazing.
As you can imagine,
side story. Now we're back in.
Doing that with all the kids is a challenge. And so with babies, Hazel was to bring it all in, and I'm sure then we can come back out and wonder how the heck they do that. Hazel was 6 months old when James did his first 70.3 or half Ironman, and Alice was 1.5 most of the time that James was training for his first full Ironman, making Hazel a whopping 3 years old.
So, did James's kids ever do the triathlon with you?
Oh yeah, they did. Okay. I mean, that was huge too. But getting to that point where we could train that much with all of them. So while James was doing one of the kids, the third child, was a baby and he was training for his first half Ironman. Yeah. I mean, Emma and Tyler were still very, very much into doing triathlons. We spent most of the summer running around after them, I think, more than we did our own. So it was interesting. I mean, it was a great time when they were growing up. Triathlon was bigger for kids 10 years ago than it is now, at least in the Midwest. It was really big, and there were kids triathlons everywhere. Almost I would say 75% of adult triathlon races that were of the shorter distance always had a kids triathlon. Just like now, when you go to a 5K, there's a kids race, or a kids dash or whatever. It's like a very common thing. That was what it was like for triathlon. And it was very, it was starting to get more and more competitive and getting licenses and things like that. So Emma and Tyler were very much into triathlon. Another reason that James and I love triathlon for families in general and love sharing about it and kind of lowering that bar to entry for everybody is because it's such a great lifelong skill. Not triathlon itself necessarily, but you have 3 sports in there, which are very individual, but you can still do with teams. You can still do with groups of people.
Yep.
And if you're going to learn how to do a triathlon or participate in even one, you will have, brought your kids into 3 new sports, right?
Yep.
And just like we were hoping, and this did happen with the older kids, yet to be seen for the younger kids, they did take to one of the sports more than the other, and throughout their life. So, and that was really what we were hoping for. Like, obviously we knew chances of them loving triathlon until they were 99 were slim to none, but knew they'd get something out of it.
Maybe they'll take one of the sports up.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal. So, that was pretty awesome. But I think that, throughout all of this, it mattered that we brought them into everything, and there's kind of 2 ways to look at doing that, right? If you yourself as an adult have a race or an event of any type, it doesn't even have to be a race, that's on the books that you want to train for or put a lot of time into, the best thing, I think, to showcase for your kids how important fitness is and how you're valuing yourself, but also your family, is bringing them into that training plan. A really easy way to do that is involving them on the weekends when you have more time to train. And you generally are going to have probably a harder, longer day with whatever that you're training for, even if it's just running or even if you're backpacking or whatever that might be. And then you kind of have a recovery day, and you can always do a family fitness day and kind of bring that into that. So that's always a pretty easy way to do it. And then also involving kids in their own sports. So they may show interest, which is what happened to us with the bigger kids, in what you're doing, because kids love their parents and they want to be like you. Innately, that's what they're going to want to do. So we never wanted to push Emma and Tyler into it. We always said, if you would like to look into this, we'll
Great.
look into it for you, or we can do it together, or we can look at races. And one day we were at a race in Madison, again, where it's very common to have kids races. And we're walking through the expo. This is also very common when there's lots of vendors and you're going to sign up, or you're showing up to register for your race the
I
day
just like buying
before.
things at those.
I mean, it's really hard not to buy new shiny stuff. I know. There are all these signs for the kids race. And sure enough, they finally asked, they're like, can we do it? Can we do this? And we're like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, yes. We
Yeah.
were so excited. Because of course, secretly, we've been hoping that would come out soon.
But you have to let them go to it. And I think this is just another form of consistency as well. Like now they
Mhm.
just know church is a big deal and fitness is a big deal. It's just consistent with you two, and you're not shoving it down their throat. You two are
Right.
actually just leading. And when they're
Right.
ready, they can come along with you. And I think as parents, sometimes we forget that kids watch what we do. And if we keep talking
Yes.
about a lot of things, but we're not actually living up to it, kids are just like,
Right.
okay, one, that breaks trust. Two, then they don't always believe us in the first place. And three, it's like, well, you keep talking about this, but you're not doing it. So I think
Right.
it's so great and important that you let them come to you when they're ready.
100%. And like I said, involving them. And they may not want to do the exact thing that you do, or,
Mhm.
if it's another sport that they need to be a little bit older at, getting them involved with something else and just sharing why it's important, that they do that, and just finding the joy in watching them and making sure that they know that you just love watching them do what they do. And that will make them continue to want to do more things. So that was important too, getting them involved with their own things. And they evolved. They eventually did swim team. And they did, because they wanted to get better. They wanted to get better
Yeah,
at swim. They did some competitive swim team for a while, and they did a lot of triathlon. Tyler eventually broke off into just absolutely loving biking and
that's
all
awesome.
types of cycling, mountain
Biking
biking,
is
and
fun. I told you this. I saw you the other weekend. I always forget, and I get on my bike, and this is so fun. I can go fast. The wind's in my hair. I can get places quickly. Yeah, I do forget how much I love to ride a bike. So, have you guys? That's not even a word. How has your family balanced all of this? Because although you have six of you, and maybe it's gotten a little bit easier. You said the older kids are out of the house. You still have two small children in the house. James did a Ironman last year, and a few years prior. You usually do 2 tries a summer, and then anything else you're doing. How do you balance that in a family? People might be listening right now thinking, yeah, I can barely get my kitchen clean, or I can't even find time to do yoga, and you guys are training for 3 sports, and you had 4 kids, now you still have 4, but now you have 2 small children still. How are you balancing that and finding time for you and James?
yeah, it has always evolved. It has definitely always evolved. Like I said, with the kids and their ages, and James and I started doing the same triathlons together. We would train together. And in the beginning, when it was just the big kids, were also parenting 50% of the time. So we could do a
Yeah.
lot of our training when the kids weren't there. But even on the weekends,
Mhm.
we got a sitter and we trained together and we made it important. And that kind of was our time. That was what we loved to do together. Whereas other
That was like
people
your
might
date
think that's
night.
their date.
That's why you got
Yes,
the
right.
sitter. Yeah.
Right. So we were doing a lot of that together, right? But making a priority, whether it is your date or not. That's what they're for. That you can reach out to family and friends to help and support, to give you the time to do that. So I think that was one way. And then when the other kids came along, and when there were 4 kids in the family, we started to break things up a little bit. So another way to look at it, also interest change, right? James discovered he was
Yeah.
this. Well, he probably didn't discover, but he tapped into it more, that he's this like endurance monster, which Jamie is
Yeah.
also an endurance monster, for those of you who don't
Oh,
know.
just the one. I'm
Ultra
working on it.
marathoner.
Yeah.
So, but he
That's
can he
me.
can do that long stuff. I cannot do that long stuff. So we started doing different things, which then meant different goals and different needs and all sorts of things with our training. So it became much easier once the little kids were here, to manage that
Yeah.
with alternating years. And so one year
Mhm.
James would be training for something, or do all of his races that year, or whatever that is, and I was the supporter and the cheerleader and the make it all happen. And I think one story that came up all the time when he was training for his first full Ironman, which again, we're talking, the oldest was, 14 years old, probably 11 and 3 and 1.5, somewhere around there. when he
Yeah.
was training for that, I got all the time, people would ask me, particularly women would ask me all the time, like, what the hell are you doing? Are you really mad at your husband? Like, I would be so pissed if my husband went and did whatever
Yeah. Well,
and just
because
decided
some
to
of the
go
days were
train for
like
the whole
probably
year.
7. Yeah, and
Oh yeah.
some of the days were like 7-hour training, 4-hour training days. Even if your significant
Yeah.
other, even if you have one child at home and they're like, I'm going to go train for 4 hours, I'll see you
Right.
later. And he's not going to
See you
come
at
back
dinner.
refreshed. He's going to come
Right.
back like exhausted.
Exhausted.
So I think that's a
And
great
then you need to
question.
be on him hand and foot. Well, you don't have to, but I did. So one thing
Yeah.
I will say is that it came easy to us, right? Because this is a love that we both have.
Yeah.
Doing this particular hobby is a love that you have. So number one, it's probably always going to be easier if you're with your spouse or significant other and you're raising a family and you have the exact same interests. That's
Yeah.
pretty helpful in
Or
that
I will
manner.
say, yes, and I would say either the exact same interest or you both support each other equally in your interests. So even if let's say
Yes.
you love gardening and you just would be in your garden all day long. This is a really weird example. But if you felt as supported by
Right.
James as he supported you, I think that's where sometimes we forget that like I'm gonna be your cheerleader 1,000%, but I am
Yes.
gonna expect you to support what I want to do and make time for that
Right.
when it's possible. And I think sometimes in families, the other person forgets, which is maybe why
Yes.
women ask, like, aren't you mad at your husband?
Yeah.
Because maybe they're
And
not feeling
it
supported.
definitely it happens. And that is what any good, healthy relationship should be. We should be supporting each other in what we need as long as we're equally showing up for each other. I think though there's when you have the same passion, that passion goes so deep, you have an understanding of what they're going through,
Hmm.
what they're experiencing. So sometimes like the
Yep.
joy for you is also there as you're watching them go through this, which can be this
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
same thing. Like you said, if you're watching your person garden and that's really what they love to do. But I think so. The big thing there to make it happen uh, is setting expectations. And I don't I don't want to sound too businesslike or over orchestrated, but honestly, setting the roadmap for them. And I don't mean like
Yeah.
planning out this great chart, but what are the expectations? What do you want from them? What do you need from them to be successful? And asking them
Yeah.
like that, and it's really
Not
important. But
expecting.
again, like, yeah, for us, it was that alternating years. And then once the little kids even got a little bit older and the older kids were older, we could start to overlap and blend years a little bit. We didn't have
Hmm.
to completely back off. We've also very recently, actually, as recent as last year was the first year we tried that overlapping, which is a big deal because an Ironman is a all in, all year thing.
Yeah. You have
It's a
to. You
nine
can't
month
half-ass a hired man.
yeah,
You
it's a
cannot.
9 month investment, and I had some things that I wanted to do last year too. But how we handled that is the Ironman was the priority, right? So if
Hmm.
I had X, Y, and Z I wanted to accomplish in the weekend with a workout, communication is key, So every week we
Yeah.
would kind of plan things out what we would want to do. We would sit down on Sunday, not at night is my suggestion when everybody's
When you're
exhausted from the
exhausted.
weekend, but kind of plan out what you want to accomplish and how that's going to look and when that's going to happen, right? So if someone needs to do a 5 hour bike ride, they probably don't want to start at noon in the middle of July. That's probably not
Right.
the best idea. So that's where I go, where someone is probably always going to have the priority. So that's an
So
approach to it as well.
just real quick, because I think you froze a little bit, but I just want to make sure I heard you. So a couple things. Don't plan on a Sunday night, but you do encourage at some point on a Sunday looking at your week into your
Yeah,
weekend and like, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's what you want to do. How are
right.
we going to make this work? But like
Yes.
have it, like you said, having a roadmap. And I know, some people are like, I'm just going to fly by the seat of my pants. I'm just going to figure it out. But I do feel like when things are passionate, when it comes to sports, when it comes to anything that's important to you, and you have other priorities, children, young or old, you do have to
Yep.
map it out because otherwise things are going to fall
It
apart.
likely
Feelings are
won't
going to get
happen.
hurt. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
And
feelings will
clear.
get
Yeah.
hurt.
And
But
it
for the
likely
person that
won't
didn't plan
happen.
it or it doesn't have the priority, their stuff gets pushed to the side.
Yeah.
And that's where arguments can come into suit and people can get resentful when really it's on you. You
Yeah.
need to take the accountability to make the plan and to make it happen.
Yeah.
If you need something as simple as that, communication with your significant other is so extremely important in telling them what you need and what you want so that they can be supportive as well, regardless of what's going on.
And I think that's just good in any relationship, whether it's
100%.
friends or married or dating, like telling your person, I need this from you because
Right.
I have found people cannot read minds. I thought they could for a while, and it
I
turns
know.
out they cannot read minds.
I
So
know.
we got to tell them. All
I
right,
know.
so let me ask you this. I have two questions before we start to wrap it up. Let's say a wife or a husband is listening to this right now and they're like, you know what? I want to get my family into fitness, or I want to somehow bring sports or bike riding into my family. How might you suggest they do this slow if you have any tips? Because it's not going to be like, we're all buying bikes and we're going to ride every Sunday, which would be really cool. But I don't know if it can go that fast.
Right. I think something that I want to bring up before too that has always been in the Martin, culture of fitness,
Mm-hmm.
is that it doesn't always have to be so hardcore or always about racing, right? Let's say it's important to you just that your family is going to move together once every weekend, whatever that might be. Really sorry about that.
It's quite
Um,
all right.
move together once every weekend, right? So it's just as important to us to go on their hikes or do whatever it is, whatever looks fun to us, walking on the local path, even if it's to go get ice cream, whatever, we're going to do
Yeah.
something different to make it fun, right? So it really should start just with that movement, right? But coming up with a goal is a really, really helpful way for a family to get from point A to point B together, and kind of figuring that out. And I can't stress enough that mapping it out, and if it's one of
Yeah.
you, particularly the female, but it can go either way,
Yeah.
that has the idea and needs to introduce it to the family or to your partner. There's only so much you can do and so much pushback you can get. We all know that, there's not a lot of opinions about whether being fit or working exercise into your life is a smart choice.
Mhm.
It pretty much is. But if they're not ready for that, the best thing you can
You
do
also have
is
to,
ask for their support, and you take your kids and you do it. You just start doing it, but
and I
again,
think,
you have to have that conversation.
and I think what you just said is so important. You can only push so much, and then maybe also realize, because I know I've been into fitness for a long time, and I've been one of the people who are like, everybody join me. We're gonna all do a 5K, and sometimes I don't realize not everyone wants to do a 5K. It's very intimidating it can be intimidating. Any kind of working out is intimidating. And sometimes I feel like in a partnership, I have experienced this before where I'm maybe leveling up in something and the other person feels less than. So then it weirdly becomes a competition. And then I feel like I needed to stop going as hard. So they felt better. But like at the end of the day, you really just have to do what makes you happy and realize that a
Yes.
lot of that is on them. Maybe they're not ready or they feel a certain way, but like if you're doing what you need to do as hard as it is, either get curious with
Yeah.
your partner like why does this bother you, or just
Right.
focus on you. Easier said than done.
Right. And I don't want to paint the picture that it has always been our number one priority for each of us individually to do racing or make it a priority. It has not. And there have been tough
Yeah.
years, right? Where one person wants to keep going and the other person is like, I don't give a crap
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
that or whatever it is. And that other person wants their partner with them, doing this stuff with them, right by their side, like they always
Yeah.
have before. And it just doesn't always work that way. We need to move through
Yeah.
life differently, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's really important to pay attention to.
Okay, so we have the fitness, and then I think you talked a little bit in the beginning, but someone is about to blend a family. I know my brother, I was just over at my brother's house, him and Cheryl. I said that I was going to have you on, and they were like, we can talk about blended families because they just blended theirs and they've been through a whole bunch of stuff. Anyone listening that either is in the heart of it where it's like, whoa, this is harder than I thought, or they're about to get into it, any tips you would give them?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what I had said earlier, you don't know. You don't know. And
Mhm.
so asking for
Yeah.
help, right? And not thinking that people are judging you or what that might be. It's asking for people for help because you need to hear their experiences, really,
Mhm.
how people are handling it. I I really wish that we would have sought help from a therapist at the time that specializes in blended families, because there are therapists that specialize in that, and kind of navigating exactly what was happening. with
Yeah.
just how humans work and how the brains work and how emotions work and everything that was happening
Mhm.
and the development of the kids at the time. For us, that would have worked. Therapy isn't the answer for everybody. There are so many books out there.
Mhm.
But also talking to somebody that you trust, finding a
Yeah.
mentor. It doesn't have to be a therapist, but finding a mentor, somebody who does have experience. It doesn't even have to be in that space, but has experience with relationships, you know, is wiser than you are, right? Has more experience that they can be a
Mhm.
sounding board for you. But somebody
Yeah.
that you trust that's a little bit removed from you so that they
Yeah.
will speak up when they hear you sound like bananas. Like what you're doing is not
Like,
right.
maybe you're overanalyzing that too much, or maybe you just gotta step back.
Yes.
I mean, I think
Yes.
both of those pieces of advice are really great, even for not even getting into a blended family, just about to be
Right.
married. Start
And
there,
yeah, and that's the
especially as
same
we
thing
get older.
too. Right. I think the other thing is really keeping your relationship front and center and making sure you make
Mhm.
time for that, which obviously that
Yeah.
is important outside of even a blended family. But I can't express enough
Yeah.
how important that is because, again, being so intentional, putting that time on the calendar with each kid, I think that's really important to make sure that they know because the time does just slip. Especially if
Yeah.
you're adding babies into the mix or you're adding new kids into the mix. I cannot express enough how important it is to make sure those older kids are being supported with one-on-one time. I would have gone back and done even more of that if I could change one thing, that would have been it.
That leads me to my last question. 2 years ago, we're in March, but we'll say February 2021. Megahn, what would you tell yourself? You go back 2 years, what would you tell yourself? What would you avoid? Or what would you have done sooner?
What would I tell myself? I would tell myself not to go on my ski trip to Vail. Because for those of you who don't know, I went on a beautiful ski trip to Vail with my family. And on the last day of the last run, I did something really awesome and I broke my knee. So that was fun. That was 2 years ago.
But Megahn, what
We're
did you
getting real
say?
close.
And what was I told that you shouldn't say?
Well, you're not supposed to call last run, which I will defend to the death that I did not do. But my brother in law and sister in law say that I did. All I said
She
at the top
said,
of the
last
mountain
run. What did you say?
about take in the mountains, take it all in. This is our last time. And I just said last, and like, oh my gosh, they were screaming at me, screaming at me. They're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
why did you say that? And sure enough, I went down the hill and I broke my knee. Good
And then
times.
Megahn went down the hill because she's a pro skier. She is not. She
I
thinks she is.
So, that
And
might have also been something I would have told myself is, you're not an Olympian skier, mother of four that, should be going at these speeds down the hill, especially since I don't know exactly, but let's say that was my third season skiing. And by first season, I took
yeah,
one lesson. And then I went out to
yeah,
Vail for one time, and then I had another season, and
yeah.
then that season was really the season that I skied the most. So I think I was extremely overconfident. I had finally gained my confidence in skiing, and I was comfortable and not terrified going down the hills, and I definitely overdid it a little bit.
So if you wouldn't necessarily say, and by the way, I mean, it was a bad, like Megan's whole leg was jacked and it was horrific. It
I
was
got a lot of
not
hardware
good.
in there now. Lots of hardware.
Lots of hardware in her knee. But now let's say you can't say don't go to Vail, but what is a lesson you can pull from that?
Oh, a
Don't be
lesson.
overconfident. Like, I mean,
Don't
because the
go
confidence is great, but
don't go
don't
down
do
the
what?
blue run in the middle. Just kidding. Um, don't go down that run.
Megahn.
I think a couple of things. So even looking back on that, right? Some lessons I've taken away from that is that running is not everything. For those of
Don't
you who
say
don't
that.
know me, Jamie and I both love running a lot. Out of the three sports out of triathlon, and I truly do love triathlon, which I've not been able to do a triathlon in a very long time because I've been injured for many years, even before I broke my knee. I love running. I love running so much. It is definitely, I wouldn't say it's defined me, but it is so my happy place. It's where I can just walk out the door and go, and I haven't been able to do it in years.
Mm,
So I think just knowing that it will be okay. And when something is taken away from you that you relied on almost every day, you can reinvent yourself. You can completely reinvent yourself. You can find new ways to get there, but you have to be really creative to do that. Because to get to that same
yeah,
exact point is really difficult, as Jamie knows.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
it's a it's a tough thing
Working on
to
that
do.
now.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. We both are. So I think that was really important. And I think too, going back to that time, that was a tough year for a lot of reasons. And so I think, again, you just can never take relationships for granted. I think putting in
Mm,
every possible minute and time into being intentional about building relationships outside of just friendships, but within your family nucleus is so important. Getting that time on the calendar and just making it regular. Even if it seems monotonous and boring, I highly challenge you to do it this year.
I believe that. I will 100% support that. I'm trying to do more of that just in all relationships in my life. I think sometimes I get so caught up in life that I forget about things instead of being intentional about who I'm spending my time with. So I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, Meghan, I appreciate you coming on and thank you so much for sharing your story. I know this is not always easy for anyone to just be like, here's my life or parts of my life. So I really appreciate you being brave and honest with me and trusting me in this place to share who you are and lessons you have learned. And I hope you have a beautiful night and I love you.